What's up, demons and demon? Tis I, attracting a demon call with him. And today we're gonna do some post-game analysis on our Clashfronts. But before we get into it, as always, toss a like and subscribe down below. Alright, so we're gonna go kind of round by round. We're gonna talk about how things went, how they could have gone. We're gonna talk about potential alliances, something to consider for future rounds, and then we're going to talk teams. Alright, without further ado, let's jump into it. Let's go to our report. Let's go all the way back to about a week ago and round 1. Alrighty. So, what I described as being maybe the ideal split is 85-15. We didn't get that exact deploy. We had a person miss. We had people miss deploy. It happens, so we had like 81-17. And we're going to talk about why you want to put your squads here on what is essentially a free tile, and why you want to go big for this tile. Okay, so let's take a look at the free tile first. Alright, by putting your, say, weakest Vanguard squad here, and some other squads that don't really detract from your power to take the contested tile, you gain points from the skirmish, so that's 8 free points, 80 points from grabbing the tile, and then you can grab some extra points from the combat trial. It's worth noting that this seems to cap out at plus 30, so you don't want to go like too heavy here because it is a free tile, but if you can get, the more points you can get out of the combat trial, the better here. Alright, now if we take a look at the flip side, they only sent one squad, so they lost 8 points and lost potential points by just sending a weak squad over here, right? They only gained a couple wins out of the combat trial, right? They didn't have like a super strong squad. They just sent a weak squad over. So that's what happens, right? As opposed to here, you know, this was we had overwhelming advantage. So as you can see, even though we had like a gazillion combat trial matches, that's still the PvP, the melee, right? So we had over 50 floors. It just seems to cap at 30, so that's worth noting. So you don't want to have too many squads, so it's just it's the combat trial is what I would call icing on the cake. It's just extra points there for the grabbing. That's kind of like an overflow type thing if you have just more squads there. All right. So then that set in motion of we grabbed this tile, which is what you want to grab, and then you can from there proceed to grab the 2 middle tiles. Now, if you're worried about your opponent's strength and all that stuff, then you can only go all in on one tile. I would recommend going in on the opposite tile from your free tile. So in this case, we would go all in on this tile if we had needed to go all in on a tile to grab it. The reason why we would go all in on this tile is because this tile would give us access to this tile the next round, this tile, and this tile. We already have access to this tile, and we already have access to this tile by holding this tile, right? So then that essentially opens up the whole board, which you want to do for future rounds with the treasure hamster at play. Now I was banking on it dropping round 3. They changed it. It dropped round 4. Then we'll talk about the treasure hamster when we get to it. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to take a look at round 2. All right. So as I mentioned, we were the strongest guild, so obviously we were going to divide up our forces. We could afford to, and go big for those 2 mid squares. We left some squads here to defend, and some squads here to defend, right? But we didn't go like a super heavy. We just left about 15, I would say 15 to 17, maybe even drop down to 10, depending if you're worried about this guild trying to take the tile or not. But they went for the higher value tile, which is kind of the smart play. Here, they didn't make a move for our tile, so we just ended up getting 3 points out of combat trial. Alright, so you can see here, we had a 3-way dance. Now, if I was the second strongest guild, I would have done what I had mentioned in round 1, where I would have just gone heavy for this tile or this tile. Instead, they went heavier for this tile, and they threw no teams at here. They went max defend here, and the other guild didn't even attack. Now, they probably didn't need 40 teams to hold this tile due to the strength of this guild, so they could have easily sent another 10, 15 squads here, gone big, and grabbed this tile, which they did not. So you can already see they're fighting from a disadvantage. Now, they did deploy here more squads just in case, just to hold it, in case this other guild did come over and grab it, because they were essentially playing for second place at that point. Maybe they just said, hey, we're not gonna go like too heavy here, we gotta defend this tile and we gotta defend this tile, and maybe we can make a play for one of these 2 center tiles, but we want to go big defending here, holding here. Alright, so maybe they identified early on that they need to play for a second. I still would have gone a little bit heavier for one of these tiles and just picked the one. Alright, so we got that. Not much action, as you can see. They did make a play, but it wasn't like a strong play, so maybe somebody left their squad there. Alright, so that gave us an advantage going after a round 2. Now, this is when the treasure hamster popped up, but he pops up 2 rounds in advance, right? So he pops up round 2. Hey, I'm here. I'm digging. First treasure is round 4. So you want to grab that treasure hamster by round 4. So what I figured, okay, so there's no real advantage going after this in round 3 because it's only 100 tile square. We want to hold our big squares, which are 200, and then because we got these in round 2, essentially this is a free tile in round 3. Alright, so let's go into round 3 and see what happened. Alrighty, now we did make a gamble here, and we sent over minimal squads to go up against a weaker guild just to see if we could take it. Someone had actually misdeployed, and that worked out in our advantage because we had 1 team left over. As we took it, we could have done it with 6, but as you could see, we needed that whole 1 extra team. Alright, so we grabbed that, so that was a free 100 points for us, right? So an extra 100 points there by just kind of like going after that, and that essentially makes this a free tile again next round. And by holding these 2, right? So we went a little bit bigger here in holding, so we beefed up. And we stayed about the same. Again, they sent the same numbers after this squad, but the problem is they now needed to worry about this guild as well, because they went after them. They lost it. Like, they made the same gamble we did. They lost, and you could see the other guild said, hey, we're gonna go heavy after second place, right? We're gonna not worry about first place. We're gonna go heavy after second. If we can beat them and take away some points from them, you know, maybe they expected us to try to grab this tile in round 3, which we didn't do, which would have helped them out a bit more. Oh yeah, so it didn't really play out that way in their favor, right? So we just kind of like said, hey, we're gonna protect, kind of like we dropped down here. They sent minimal squads over here. That was probably not the best idea. Like, they should have committed either like, hey, we're gonna go big for this one, and maybe try to hold this one with minimal. I'm not sure, they were at a disadvantage anyway. So alright, so this is kind of how our board is shaped up after round 3. What could have they done? Again, they could have either A, abandoned it and gone heavy, I think, more for this tile. Obviously, they didn't send enough squads over again. So they went a little, I think they went a little heavier this time than last time, but still, it wasn't enough. Right, they could have maybe gone bigger for this tile, but they should have just picked 1 tile as opposed to the 2. And this is what I'm going to talk about. This is the advantage of putting your Vanguard team there, right? It's going to be a little bit stronger. And so you get essentially a few more points, right? So if you looked at the other squad, they sent a weak squad in there. Whereas we sent a Vanguard squad, so we picked up an extra 8 points from the skirmish. And we picked up an additional few points here from the trial, right? So as opposed to the other team, they only got +4 off the combat trial. We got an extra 12 compared to them, right? Because we got 8 from skirmish, 16 minus 4, that's 12. And then we get the 250 for free. So that's essentially a free tile. So that's a free tile next round, and that's a free tile next round. So then on round 4, this is going to be a 500 square tile. So the best thing to do is for us to pick one of these 2 tiles, to try to keep one of the 200 tiles, and then go heavy for the 500 tile. Right now, they would have a choice of, they could figure maybe we're gonna go big for this tile. They can try to defend, but if we go big, we're going to crush them. So it's strength on strength. Our strength is stronger. We crush them, and now they're going to lose more ground, right? So maybe they have to, maybe they should consider abandoning this, if you think the big guild's going to go for it, and go heavy for one of the middle tiles, or heavy to try and take this tile back. Now, they could have just abandoned this tile. I think the better play would have been to go heavy for this tile here once more, and try to take that out, because again, that would be 200 points. You'd only be losing 80 here, and you'd be definitely losing 100 here, so you'd be still making a ground, and it would give you access to more tiles in the next round. But let's see how it actually played out. Alright, so they went heavy. They decided maybe, hey, maybe we've got to play for second. We're not going to get first. We're at a big point disadvantage. Maybe playing for first isn't realistic. We got to play for second. Let's just go hard after third place. So they went big. They took their tile back. They went big. They tried to defend. But again, we had the power advantage. We went in and we crushed them. So it was strength on strength. And they got crushed, right? So because they didn't make a big play for this tile, we had minimal teams. Right, we didn't really get much. Oh, there was no skirmish battle. Alright, so they didn't even send a skirmish team. And then here, we just kind of said nobody went after that. Hey, that works out. They did make a small play for this. Again, we reduced our forces because it's only 100 tile. We don't want to give a tile away for free, because we do have strong skirmish teams, so we can at least get 20 points there. And if we do, like I said, leave some squads behind, we have the ability to pick up extra points in the combat trial, right? So they're not really wasted. And then here, I said, hey, it doesn't matter if we this tile was essentially a free tile, because we abandoned this small tile, and this guild was, you can see, easily able to take it back, right? So we just abandoned that one, and we went big and got the treasure hamster by doing all that and kind of holding everything that we already had. We clinched first place. So that's a nice feeling, because then you clinch, you know you're going to get promoted. You can give everybody the round off. Now, you may not want to do that in future rounds when you're playing for the Exalted. You may want to go hard and try to take an additional couple of tiles if you can. Maybe we would try to take this tile back, or maybe we would try to take this tile or this tile in the next round, right? To give us even a bigger point advantage going into the Exalted rankings. Alright, so that's just something else to consider, but I figured it's the first round. We're not getting promoted to Legendary. We're not getting promoted to Exalted. We're just going to the next phase, where we can just afford to take a round off, and everybody can take a break. And all the squads just sit there anyway. So again, we go to round 5, where we just sat there, right? So we just sat there. Number 2 just went hard against number 3 to essentially eliminate them. Now, they could have gone bigger against this to try to get the points, but they were already at a large disadvantage, as you can see, going into round 5. So it's going to be very difficult for them to gain anything. So again, we had nothing to go much on here. We had a little bit of action here, but again, they didn't send any more squads, so our team is easily held, and they got crushed here, right, in both of their plays. They just didn't have the firepower. They again made a play for this, but again, they didn't have the strength. As we saw, they're not very big guild. They don't have a lot of power, so just by having like 18 squads or so here, we easily took, remember, their square with 7 squads a couple rounds back. So by having 8 here, we had a solid defense. That was the only one that could hit here. They didn't make a play for this. It didn't make sense. It's only 80 points. It wasn't really going to help them. Again, this was a free square that round. And by just leaving our main forces here, they sat here and did nothing. Again, that's why I said combat trial taps out at 30. So again, there's nothing wrong when you're going up against a powerhouse guild in your district, like our guild, in playing for second. I say that because guilds 1 and 2 both get promoted to the next rank, and once you get promoted to legendary, you're kind of set. So the advantage is you get to a legendary as quick as possible, and then get to exalted, because the way it looks like is if we're only gonna go for games, now if we get this a future time, it may be different, but if we go and no, we gotta go look at the rewards to see it, right? So we start out at elite because that's the top 16 guilds, right? So then the top 2 from each match from elite will move on to epic. So now we have 8 guilds. So we're going to have 4 guilds in that round that move from epic to a legendary. So this is going to be game 2. This is going to be game 3. So as soon as your game 3 match ends, you're guaranteed essentially to get exalted, because you have to play a legendary match to get to exalted. So all the legendary teams are, the first 4 legendary teams are going to be our first 4 exalted teams this go around. That's why I think they're going to have another match. Maybe we'll get like a few weeks off, and then it'll come back towards the end of the season. So we'll get a second round of games at that point, right? And in which point it's going to be a little bit harder to hold exalted. So you're going to have to do those things where you grab the points. And again, like I said, there's no issue for playing for second. Both first and second get promoted, and second place only loses 100 guild medallions. It's not that many points at the end of the day. It's not going to break the bank. It's not going to be the difference between getting a Celestial today or a Celestial tomorrow, right? It's not really going to change too much. 100 is nothing. Alright, so then we go to Epic. Like I said, so it's going to be 8, and then you're going to have 4. So the top 4 are going to have their match, and then they're going to go all to Exalted. Then anybody that is in Epic that won, they'll come in to a Legendary as well. So maybe we'll have a bigger, kind of like a final match for Legendary, but we'll see how that goes. Alright, so that's kind of it for the post-round analysis and looking at that. So one of the other things I wanted to touch base on, and it's something to consider going into future rounds, now that the stakes, I would say, are a little bit higher, because getting up to Legendary next match is going to be big, is we're going to talk about alliances and who you should form an alliance with, and who you may want to avoid forming an alliance with, right? All right. So for our case, you know, I would expect that the guilds next round are going to be stronger, but if you do have these weak guilds that somehow manage to have snuck in, you don't want to make with an alliance with them. They're cannon fodder. You want to just chew them up, especially if you're a stronger guild, especially if you're a cracked guild. Now what you can do is you can look at the strengths of the other guilds. Ideally what you want is to have the second strongest guild on the opposite side, right? Because you don't really gain too much, or it would be here or here, because you don't really gain too much from forging an alliance with the guild that's on your contested tile, because you need this tile. You need to grab this tile first round. This is your number 1 priority. I don't think there's any fair deal that you could cut that would give one guild this tile. It's just not. It's the way it's designed, the way the match is designed. There's no value in alliance between these two guilds, right? Because if you do form an alliance and you do give up this tile, you're already starting out the match at a huge disadvantage. Alright, that being said, you could forge an alliance with this guild, and you just take this, and then you just say, okay, this guild, you guys, you're gonna play for first. Try to, and we'll play for second. So, right? Or you could, what I would think would be ideal is you find the second strongest guild that's on the opposite side here. So, like in our case for this round, the only guild that I would have considered forming an alliance with Ark here. I'll just use them as an example. And that's just because they are the second strongest, right? So then you talk about, like, divvying up. So you figure out, okay, our guild, stronger guild, we got to get first place. That's it. We'll get first, you guys get second. So how are we going to get there, right? So the first round, we do our 85, 15, or 90, 10 split, like we did in the first round. Then our guild, say, gets this tile, and right, so we hold this tile, we get this tile, and then we go heavy and we grab this tile, right? So we know that this tile isn't going to be contested, and then we say give them this tile, which kind of lets them do the same thing, right? Okay. So, I would say then in the next round, that lets us just you deploy here to worry about holding this and then holding this. Then first place gets the center, and it essentially lets your second guild do the same thing, right? So you, first place, it gets the center and gets the point. Then, right, so then you're kind of looking like this whole side of the map is purple, and then this side of the map here is all yellow, right? So we have purple would be here, and then yellow here. So then the treasure hamster pops up. All right, so what I think would be a fair trade-off is, say if it popped up in the same square, the number 1 overall guild goes heavy here, it grabs this, you make a trade, right? So number 1 gets this, number 2 then gets access to the center tile, and they get this tile in exchange, right? So you're getting 500 points, and you're essentially giving up 350. Now, you do lose a little bit more, because you're going to have less combat trial and a less skirmish, but I think that's kind of a fair trade-off, right? So then that means you only have to essentially defend this tile and this tile, and then Ark would only have to defend this tile and this tile, right? So that's how I think the optimal alliance would work out. If you do want to form an alliance, again, that would be something you would consider for next round, right? You just have to make sure that you go big here, you hold this one, and you hold this one, and that second place can grab this tile and grab this tile while holding this tile and this tile, right? Because you don't want to, like, open it up so that the other guilds, right? But you can, again, then in your future rounds, you can kind of go minimalistic in grabbing these tiles, right? Because you'd have to, like I said, you go big on this tile, you go big on this tile while trying to hold this tile and this tile, right? In that second round. The second round essentially becomes the big round if you have an alliance. So then, like I said, you could just block them out as long as you can kind of like prevent the other two guilds from getting this square and this square, and then this square and this square, right? Because then that just leaves everything in the middle open up, right? So that's it for alliances. Again, you could do essentially almost kind of like, it's a little bit harder to do an alliance with this guild, right? Because they'd only be able to get this free square here. This would kind of like leave a gap here. It would make it difficult because then your number one guild would have to go for this square, and you'd have to try to control this square, this square, this square, and this square, right? So it makes it very, or they'd have to control this square, and you'd have to control this square, and this square, right? It just makes it a little bit more difficult. So we have to control 2 squares, you'd have to control 3 squares. So that's it for alliances. Oh, let's talk about teams. I'm gonna go in. Now, I can't look at my deploy. I did save all of my teams. Alright. So here we have your control team. I slotted in Serum because he is better than Alsa. He works great against done teams. He's just all around a great hero. He gets the buff from the Nero. I kind of borrowed this squad from Yapala. So that's one of the things you're going to notice is that if you look at the Vanguard squads and a lot of squads, they're going to be pre-made squads off Yapala because, again, we have to make 5 teams, and that can be difficult for some people, especially given a roster depth, right? So you're just like, I need ideas, I need good teams. So they put out some good teams. I borrowed some of their teams. I modified some of their teams. But again, Siren wasn't out when it first started. So we just swapped out Elsa, and then we gave Cascading to our Siren. Again, this works good against Lily May teams, and it's going to work decently against Dun teams, because Siren, main ability, his EX weapon just bypasses Dun's ability. So it's really, really nice. So we have a strong squad here. Alright. So again, this is where most people are probably running Tassie and Taylene. I broke out Tassie for a different squad. You'll notice the squad only has 1 support. Most other people are probably running it with 2 supports. But I figured with the power of the strength of my account versus everybody's else account in the district, I can get away with just the single support hero because I do have an overwhelming Paragon advantage, right? Most of my teams are going to be Paragon 4, Paragon 3 with a few Paragon 2 heroes in there, just kind of dragging things along. Maybe one day we will get them all up to Paragon 4, but we'll see about that. I mean, 25 heroes is a bit. Alright, so we'll go to Team 3. As you can see, we're running a version of the recommended Graveborn team, except I swapped out Igor for Sylvina. I'm a big fan of this Sylvina Harak combo, just because Sylvina is very, very devastating. You can't really plan for her in this game mode, and she just pairs well with Harak because she goes over, she hits them, Harak smells blood in the water. He goes over, kills them, it's an easy kill, especially with the Graveborn tiles. And then Harak very quickly starts getting stronger and stronger, and not to mention that Sylvina has a bit of CC of her own, because when she kills someone, everybody starts running around screaming. So it's a really strong, a really good combo. The only disadvantage here, I would say, is that my arena is only a Supreme Plus, but everybody else is Paragon 4, so we can kind of get away with it. And again, people aren't really matching up manually against these squads. We do have an advantage, and we can get away with stuff like that. Alright, so here we have our Dun Dio team. Again, we snuck in Paragon to Larson. And then we have our Leica, Lenya, Dun, and Dio. That may have just been some short-sightedness on my part. I probably should have pushed Larson to a Paragon 3. Just because he's so good for PvP right now, especially with the Wilder talents. As you can notice, we've already on our 3rd Wilder team. We want to run as many Wilder comps as possible because they are the strongest talent tiles for PvP. I think Graveborn are about equal to them, but we can only really run maybe 1 to 2 effective Graveborn teams. Alright, so we've got Dundio, very strong. And again, we're running with a Lightforge. Oh, I don't know if we got Harmonic here. And then we've got Star Surge here. Or Surging Spell. Just because it's a really strong PvP spell. I think it works well with this team. The other one would be Stormstrike. But I've been running this squad for my Vanguard squad. Now, you notice this is a bit different than the recommended teams. We have a Lily May in here. We have our Tassie. We have Cryonaya with a Freyasto and a Damien. And again, we're running Stormstrike. Just because Cryonaya is so devastating at the beginning of the fight. Lily May is our air encounter. And we have Tassie, who's just generally a pest. She's like the non-celestial Hypogean version of Cryonaya minus the execute, right? Because her ult is devastating once it goes off. And Cryonaya's ability and her ults are devastating. So I like this team a lot. I've been running it for my Vanguard squad. Again, the entire team is almost P4 with 1 P3. We'll get Tassie up to a P4 sooner or later. So again, it's even like when you have a big account, it's difficult sometimes to get all of the heroes that you want. unless you really spend to get everybody up to P4. That might be on your PvP roster. Although I think for the most part, if you have primarily Paragon 4, you can get away with sticking in some Paragon 3 and one Paragon 2 hero here or there, right? You see, we didn't have that many. So we have that overwhelming strength advantage going into these matches, right? So if we go into here, and we go again back into our report. So say, let's go to around to where we actually do see some Vanguard action. So as you can see, right, I have the overwhelmingly power advantage. They are running the meta, so that's why sometimes it pays to buck the meta, so you can run stronger teams or teams that can counter those meta type teams, right? So we have this team is very strong, right? And what you could do is you could always go to the previous rounds, see who's in the Vanguard, see what they're running as their Vanguard squad, because it's a safe bet that they've identified that as probably one of their stronger squads, and that's why they're running it in the Vanguard, right? So we run it here, and it's very strong. Now again, if you have a strong account, there's nothing wrong with running the meta. We see a Levy here running the recommended team. It is the Tassie Taline Bonnie team. It is going to be very strong. That's just the team that I picked. That's one of the other things too you have to consider as a guild leader or a vice leader, is who is going to be in your Vanguard. So you need to know what those meta teams are and just kind of rank them. You want other people to rank their squads too, just so they know how to deploy. And then it comes up to the leadership to decide, okay, this is the strongest Vanguard team. I'm going to put this as the Vanguard team, right? So say if like they're Dundio, they may be running that, but maybe their Dundio's a little bit weaker on the Paragon side, so we run the stronger Paragon team. Now you have Brownie here too. Oh, he doesn't get his Vanguard match in, poor guy. All right, let's go here. Let's see, did he get a Vanguard match in? No, he doesn't. He gets one in here though, right? So you can see he bucks the meta as well, and he's gonna run all of his own teams. I can easily identify what his good teams are because he is my sparring partner for Arena. So I know some of his strong comps, what strong comps are going to work. So obviously I can slot this in. I'm like, okay, this is going to be his strongest comp. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to slot that into the Vanguard and pick up our wins there. Again, Paragon level is always a good guide, right? So if they have more Paragon levels on one team than another team, that's probably the team you want to go for your Vanguard. Right, and it also pays like where I did in around, I think it's round 3 and potentially round 4, right? So as you could see is when you have multiple people in your Vanguard putting out their squads, you again have to determine, is my number 3 squad stronger than say somebody else's squad that they're putting out there, right? So is my number 3 is stronger than this Cryo team? And because it's all Paragon 4 or almost all Paragon 4, the answer is yes, right? So even while this is a really strong squad here, I think that my Paragon 4 team is a little bit stronger, so that's why we ran that. As you can see, the team got 9 wins in the melee, which just kind of shows that it was the stronger team, right? So that's another thing to consider as well. Especially when you divvy up your Vanguards here. So here you can see I put myself, you guys here, and then I'm like, well, we want to make sure that we have a strong Vanguard here. We didn't get attacked, but I had my 3rd strongest here for the Vanguard skirmish. Oh, it's because we had 2 guilds, so you get 8 for each attacking guild. That's what it is. Yep, so they didn't even put out a Vanguard team, so they'd probably just be like, hey, we're not going to put a Vanguard out there just to give them a free extra 40 points, right? We got 40 points instead of the 16. So, they didn't want to give us extra points, probably. All right, so that's just kind of what you can do for teams, and that's kind of it for this one. Again, like I said, the big thing is to just kind of like pick your plan. ahead of time, make your alliances ahead of time. You don't have to really reveal your alliances until, I would say, round 2. That's when it's going to become obvious, when you make the split plays for these tiles and the big play for this, just to lock out these other 2 guilds, right? So you want to lock out that, you want to lock out that. So that's just kind of that. Yeah, again, like I said, there's nothing wrong with playing for second place. Second place gets promoted. Second place gets pretty much all the same rewards as first place, minus 100 guild medallions. Again, at the end of the day, it's not going to be that big of an issue. And that's it for this one. I wish you good luck in your future matches, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!